Welcome, everyone, to the Ventura County Works podcast. I'm Rebecca Evans, Executive Director of the Workforce Development Board of Ventura County. And today we're doing something a little bit different and celebratory. Instead of being the one answering some questions and asking, I'm going to be your host for this special episode. We're here because our organization, the Workforce Development Board of Ventura County, just received the 2026 Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act Trailblazer Award at the National Association of Workforce Boards Forum in Las Vegas. And I wanted to bring together two very special people who were central to this moment and this conversation. First, Norman Albansis, our Assistant Director, who has been right in the middle of the work that earned us this award. Welcome, Norman.
Thanks, Rebecca. And my first podcast, official podcast. Did a lot of work behind the scenes, but I'm happy to be here today.
Yes, very much so. And thank you for all the work you do to prepare us and our guests for the podcast and getting those scheduled and going right on time. It's really made, I think, the listenership of this podcast grow when we have consistent guests and a schedule there. So thank you for that. Also
Absolutely.
joining us today is Drew Bursich, CEO and National Association of Workforce Boards, NAWB, as it's called, the organization that presented us with this award. Drew, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here to kind of celebrate the workforce board in Ventura County. When you think about the size and scope of our system to win this award, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, a little bit later, but it is a very special thing, and so happy to be here to celebrate with you today.
Thank you so much. And as we were just talking about, Drew's very busy at the national level supporting workforce boards and working on with us on the reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and making sure that meets the needs of all of our communities, job seekers and employers alike. So we thank you and the folks at NOB very much for that work.
Absolutely, we appreciate you. So.
All right. Before we dig in, I want to give our listeners a little context and why we're so excited about this. For those who may not be familiar, the WIOA, or Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that's the federal legislation that provides funding for workforce boards across the country. The Trailblazer Award recognizes workforce boards that are leading the field in innovation, strategy, and impact. For our team, this recognition was humbling, and it's a reflection of years of work by a lot of people across our system. We were so happy and excited for a workforce board in Ventura County of our size, which is like a lot of workforce boards across the country, to receive this award. Norman, first, when you found out that we won, what was that moment like for you?
I think the first thing that I replied back to you in all capital letters was no way.
Yes, yes, it was.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it was a shock to me. And then, I thought of our team and the journey we took to get here. Every single person on our team has worked so hard and embraced the change that we have done over the years, and they did it with a really positive attitude. And I remember starting with the team back in 2019, and one of the things that stuck with me during the interview was the need for transition and transformation. And I think we've worked really hard to do that over the past 6 years. And so, right alongside our team, I also thought about our providers, the organizations who do the work for us every single day. I always tell them their success is our success, and we genuinely believe that as an organization. So, this award, I think, is as much as theirs as ours, and we're grateful for everything they do to help move our system forward and to serve the job seekers and employers in our community.
Mm. Wonderful. And that response, Norman, I know that that is the energy that you bring to work every day and that you have for many years working in the workforce system. And you have such a deep understanding of the provision of services as well as the impact in the community and the value for our employers. Norman referenced really quickly, I also came on at the very beginning of 2019, and our agency
Mhm.
director at the time, Melissa Livingston, had said to me, this is a time for transition and transformation. And I love that Norman remembered that from his interview because 6 months later, we're talking to Norman about joining our team and bringing all of his experience as well as his local knowledge to our team. And I will say it has been a journey of transition and transformation. So to receive this award, it was a reflection of all of that work because it's not always easy.
True.
But it really reaffirmed for us that we were on the right track in making decisions with our board and with our partners to improve services for everyone. So, Drew, let's start with the bigger picture because I think sometimes people in our community may not fully understand what a local workforce board actually does and why it matters so much. We're always trying to get the word out about that. Can you help our listeners understand that what it is at stake when boards are not operating at a high level?
Sure. And, I think it goes without saying that boards that aren't operating at a high level are a risk to our communities in many ways because the role of a workforce board, for those that might not be super familiar, is that we are the convener of conveners. There are very few other places where you have one board that represents so many different parts of our community, whether it's K through 12 education, community colleges, labor, human services, but most importantly, the business community that is really the place that this talent is going to find those sustaining jobs that will allow them to raise their families and be able to have that successful life and that economic mobility that is the hallmark of the American dream. And so when workforce boards aren't operating optimally, what happens is you start to see breakdowns. Let's say we aren't partnering as well with our community college system, so we're not producing the right kind of training to be able to meet the business's needs. Or let's say even, our K through 12 system or labor isn't at the table. Like all of these different bits and pieces really allow us as a community to come together and operate in a way that no one else within our communities really convenes. I mean, sometimes you look at chambers of commerce and things like that, but even there, they don't bring everyone to the table that we bring to the table. And they're also, it's really truly becomes like this critical infrastructure to be able to maintain not just the businesses in our community, but really, again, that economic opportunity for our communities to grow and expand and to take advantage of what, right now. I mean, you talked about you joined in 2019. What a time to join, right? Just a few months later, the entire world shut down. And then we were in this upheaval. Well, right now we're in a similar upheaval, right? We have not seen a technological or economic change this dramatic in many, many years. And having businesses at the table saying, this is what the future looks like for us, then having all these other partners saying, great, we're here to support you. That's really where the power comes. And when boards aren't doing that very effectively, it's a real problem. So congratulations to you all for bringing everyone together and being able to kind of avoid those challenges.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Drew. And yes, we were out of the gate so excited and had all these grand plans. And then in 2020, yeah, everything shut down. And so it was
That's
like
right.
we took a slow down, but you know what? That also gave us and our board opportunity and time to reflect and deepen our planning, I would say. So it has worked out, and we worked with our partners to respond as well as possible here in the community. From what you see nationally, Drew, how common is it to see a board operating with the kind of strategic consistency that we've tried to build here in Ventura County?
I don't think you see it often. And I think that's reflected in your victory for this award, right? There's over 500 um, local boards throughout the United States, and what we don't often see, and I even had to go back over the last couple of days and kind of reread some of the submissions. Like you see some boards that do a handful of things really well, but then they don't do everything consistently well. And that is problematic because the workforce boards that operate the best don't necessarily shine in certain areas. They are consistent and they operate well. Now, I will say, I think you do shine in a couple of areas, but I think what you're doing very, very well that others could learn from is really getting that consistency, that rigor, and trying to be perhaps a little bit more methodical in that operating rhythm, quite frankly, and having a board that is aligned to that, because the internal staff can drive a lot of this, right? But you really have to have a board that supports you to get it across the line.
Absolutely. And I think what we demonstrated was our planning and consistency as a staff team. The board really welcomed that, which we're thankful for, but they've also seen how that pays off. And they've seen
That's
where
right.
that gets us. And so they really have aligned with that and let us know that they appreciate it. Um, so what are the boards that across the country that are getting it right, and many are, what are they doing that others are not necessarily doing?
So I really think it comes down to two things. One, I think that there's great board engagement. So often I get invited to go sit in on a board meeting virtually or maybe in person, and I sit down and it feels very much like a perfunctory government board. Let's gavel in, let's gavel out. We're going to review a couple of things, but the board doesn't really add anything to the conversation. They don't really bring thoughts and bring innovations into the conversation. I think boards that are getting it utilize their boards as a tool to think and to grow and to strategize, not to just, check the box that we did this because it is, a government mandated requirement, right? I think that's number one. Number two, boards that get it are business led. They start by really engaging with the business, getting that feedback, planning around that, and then looking at the job seeker and how we best support the job seeker. The ones that don't get it tend to start with the job seeker first, and that's where sometimes you get this misnomer that we are a human service agency or something along those lines. And not that we don't want to help people, but we help people best when we're putting them into jobs that are in high demand, where they can actually grow and continue to see that positive economic mobility, that positive outcome, that sustainable wage, that job that isn't going away in 6 months. Those are the things that are important. And you do that by starting by listening to your businesses and letting them say, this is the North Star for where we're going. Help us build that talent pipeline so that we can achieve our North Star.
Mhm. Thank you. Absolutely. And I would add that what's been important for us is to do both. We wanted to be
Oh, yeah.
cautious that we didn't just have a pendulum swinging from business focus to job seeker focus to business focus, that you really are serving both. And there are ways to go about that in a planful way. So I'll talk a little bit now about what we've actually built because I do think it is what makes this recognition very meaningful for us. And like I said, it wasn't easy, but we really put our heads together and planned with our board on what are the right things to do right now in this moment. And let's do them. Let's do them when they're challenging. Let's push forward. And so this has really been a great vote of confidence for what we're doing. What we set out to do was not just run programs. Of course, that's important. And key to us, as you said, you mentioned, Drew, the best practices, looking at what are the best practices in the field. We set out to build a system that was driven by strategy and informed by real employer and community input, and then accountability to those outcomes. So, one of the things we describe in our proposal, and I was just talking about this actually at CWA yesterday, is in California, in WIOA programs, we're required to put together a local and then a regional plan for how we're going to meet all of the requirements. And as I say, both the letter of the legislation, but also the spirit of the legislation, which is providing local employers with the ready workforce that they need and um, assisting those with barriers to employment in gaining the skills and knowledge to meet the needs of those employers. And our funding and our services bring the two together. We do that through a lot of partnership with education, with training and education. But we looked at that's essentially what a workforce board does. But we looked at our local and regional plan and went to the board and said, okay, here's everything we are required to do and how we are planning to do it. And then we did board strategic planning to talk about how we would go about meeting those requirements and adding to it what we desire to do. I talk a lot about there's what we're required to do, and then there's what we desire to do locally to meet the needs of our employers and our job seekers. And then in addition to that, once we had a strategic plan from our board, we go to our MOU partners and we do a strategic planning session with the partner agencies that work with us to deliver services every day and align that with the board strategic plan, aligning that with our local and regional plan that goes to the state. And then the state puts all those plans together and submits to the feds. So you have a through line of intention and strategy. And what I also like, as someone who's worked in organizations, public organizations, and community-based organizations, I've been through a lot of strategic planning processes, and I've seen a lot of very lofty multi-year plans that feel really good when you put them in place. And then there's no time or capacity to actually fulfill all of them. Sometimes, in worst case, they sit on a shelf, and and then every few years there's a need to uh, restart. What we've done is put in place a system where we make sure we're meeting the needs. We do constant surveys. We consistently do feedback groups. We pull together focus groups. We do surveys and have a loop of understanding how what we're doing is meeting the needs and how are we on target through that strategic planning. And any information that we get goes into the next planning session. We revisit the strategic plan every year with our board, every year in the fall. Even through the pandemic, we were able to do it virtually. And then every 2 years is an opportunity to reset those goals. So it aligns again with our local and regional plan. So all of that to say, going about it strategically, constantly getting feedback from both our partners and our customers, both businesses and job seekers, has helped us stay on track. Norman, shifting to you for a moment, one of the things I'm most proud of is our employer focus group work that we did in 2025. This was something that our board identified in strategic planning, 6 focus groups, 6 different industry sectors. What were employers telling us and what may have surprised us the most?
Yeah, and so our business solutions team, shout out to them. They each have an industry sector that they focus on, and so they did these focus groups for us last year just to hear from the employers. And really what surprised us was the consistency. Think we went into expecting each sector to have its own unique story. And in some ways they did actually, but we looked across all of those 6 focus groups and had a lot of the same themes that kept coming
Mhm.
regardless of whatever the sector it was. Employers were telling us that they were struggling with finding applicants. They were finding struggling to find people who were ready for the workplace on day one. So that included, people who are reliable, know how to communicate, they're punctual, and they know how to work in a team. And those are real essential workplace skills that just kept coming up in every single focus group. And another thing that surprised us was leadership. The employers across the different sectors, they were promoting their best workers into supervisor roles, and then those individuals were sinking because nobody prepared them how to manage people. And that was something we didn't fully anticipate, but it helps shape how we're thinking about serving employers in the future. And of course, we heard a lot about the cost of living. Housing, transportation, childcare, all of those are expensive. And so employers told us that even, if they made a great hire, workers had to leave because not of the job, but everything surrounding it, all of those things that I mentioned. So it's really not something that a workforce board can solve alone, but it tells us where we need to be at the table with our partners in the region.
Drew, does that resonate with what you're hearing from employers nationally?
It does. I think, these are fairly universal problems. I mean, maybe different spaces on the scale. If you're in West Virginia, housing costs may not be quite as intense as they are in your neck of the woods. But childcare is a problem everywhere. The number of job ready applicants, the folks that are actually skilled, and the way that our economy and the way that we recruit has changed so greatly that, with everything being online, people are just flooding companies with resumes. And to be able to kind of um, find enough qualified applicants inside of that flood of people that are just sending out resumes because they really are so yearning to find an opportunity to be productive and to get that dignity that comes through work, right? That's really become a real problem for a number of organizations. I was very fortunate before I had this role. I used to lead recruiting for a very large part of Amazon, not a company that generally has a problem getting enough applicants. But I will tell you, we had a hard time finding the right applicants to be able to fill the positions that we had, even though we would get a flood of applicants, right? That's my lived experience at a very, a name brand organization. So
Mhm.
how do we, how as businesses do we think about what the future looks like and how we go and build that talent for ourselves? Do we buy it, which companies were doing for a while around, especially in the IT space? They were just throwing tons of money at existing talent. Do you build it? Which I think more companies are starting to come around to the thought of, let's do apprenticeships or work-based learning of some sort, and let's, build the talent that we need in the future. Maybe they aren't job ready on day one, but there's still really potential, there's still employees with real potential that we could get value long term. So I think that's a positive sign we're seeing. You can rent it, right? You can buy, build, or rent talent. And I think a lot of companies are starting to say, you know what, we're not wanting to rent talent. They'll come in for a short period of time. We'll have them accomplish a certain task, and then we lose that critical knowledge, the amount of energy we used to develop them to do whatever they did. Now we've lost that. So I'd rather spend that time investing in work-based learning and creating a relationship with an employee that will be loyal to me, right? I think we're starting to see that change that's being led at the federal level, through actions that we're seeing out of Washington, D.C. But I also think that businesses are just starting to come to that realization because of all the challenges that Norman was talking about a moment ago. That your businesses are seeing there in Ventura County. They're generally universal, and there are some universal solutions to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, one of the things we want to take a look at, and this is a whole separate conversation, is
Mhm.
how we make our system work for businesses. And so, because many businesses will look at all the requirements of a registered apprenticeship and say, oh, that's a lot of extra time and work that I need to do. So, we're really locally looking at how do we make on-the-job training opportunities, work-based learning, apprenticeships doable and feasible and pencil for our local employers as well as our participants. But I do believe that the value proposition is very strong for businesses to be able to hold on to their talent, and especially those that they've invested in. Norman, let's talk about numbers for a moment. So for us in our region, over 3,500 people served with a 73% employment rate after exiting the program. And that equals roughly $119 million in total annual earnings generated. So those are dollars being spent right here to live in our region. What do those figures represent beyond just the metrics?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked this question because we've done a lot of work around human-centered design. And so those numbers represent people. They represent someone who came to us not knowing what was next. They may have gotten laid off from their job, left a job that pays a living wage and didn't know what was next for them. And so when we talk about $119 million in earnings, it's really not an abstract figure. It's like you said, money going back into our regional economy. That's rent being paid, kids in school, families staying in Ventura County instead of leaving because they can't afford to stay because housing is so expensive. So what drives our team, knowing that the work that we do every day, whether it's a career navigator sitting with a customer or a staff member writing a report or a partner running a training program, all of it connects back to those outcomes. And we really take that seriously. And, we also know that we can do more. So, which is why we keep pushing to improve and do better.
Thank you. And that is definitely also, I will say, very Ventura County. The fact that we're doing human-centered work and usually using those best practices, that I will tell you is meaningful for both the employers as well as the job seekers here in Ventura County, just given how we are as a community. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of our board members, our current chair, Laura Martinez, our staff. We have an excellent team, a small but mighty team, as we say here in the Workforce Board. Most of our team has been working on this for many years and understands the system as well as many of our board members and our team are originally most are from Ventura County. So these are their family, friends, and neighbors that they're serving as well. Our service providers who are rooted here locally, the contractors that we work with to get our work done, those that have built teams here in Ventura County by hiring locally, have been a crucial part of making all of this work. And I would say each one of those contractors, be it Managed Career Solutions, who has expertise in working with persons with disabilities, the Goodwill career team, Equus Workforce Solutions, Eckerd Connects, who is our one-stop operator right now. These are folks that have deep knowledge in the workforce system, but they also bring a certain level of subject matter expertise, and they root that here locally to serve the community. Our partners, especially the community college district, there's a lot of talk in California of how we work together, workforce boards and community colleges. We could not be closer to our community college district right now. And Vice Chancellor Dr. Herrera, who serves on our board, and her team is a wonderful example of that. We've had enormous support, and we've seen a coming together of our colleges and our work with the system. Our partners in adult education and the Adult Education Consortium here locally, and our K-12 system, the superintendent's office at our Ventura Office of Ed, Dr. Morales, has been a huge champion and a supporter. And then all of the private providers and employers who work with us. We have employers who have taken the time to record videos telling their story of how the workforce system has worked for them. And they've come to some of our board meetings. They've helped sponsor events and career fairs so that we could promote our work, but also they're telling the story of how it's worked for them. And we're greatly appreciative of those partners. And I will confess and apologize, Drew. I know when we received our award at NAWB, that conference is really good at keeping things on time, and we were told you have 3 minutes. We filled we filled the stage with partners because we had so many partners attending the national forum. And when I looked back at the recording of the remarks and my introduction of all the partners, it was 8 minutes. I was red in the face because they're like, oh, we really went over time. However, we've really appreciated the opportunity to highlight everyone, and I think their participation in the NAWB Forum also speaks to the value of what you bring
Absolutely.
together nationally.
Well, and it's part of the reason why you won the award, right? Is because you do have these great partnerships. I mean, if you wouldn't have done that, it almost would have felt disingenuous. And so,
Mm.
a huge credit to you, and I was so grateful that, we were able to see so many of your partners come up and join us in Las Vegas and come up on stage and be recognized. This is really an opportunity to kind of show off and highlight the board that's doing it the best, right? And that best practice. And so we hope that in future years we see the same thing happen with every Trailblazer winner. So thank you for setting a high standard and a high bar.
Thank you. Norman, you helped build a lot of these systems that are behind this award. And I will say a lot of these systems were also in dialogue with our board members. Some of these systems that we've put together, it was our ideas, but also we had board members who were engaged enough to say, can we get reports that look like this? Can we get this level of information? How can we feature our contractors and et cetera? Um, Including our performance dashboards and the customer feedback approach, meaningful customer feedback approach. What's the hardest part of turning strategy into something that actually works on the ground?
I think one of the challenging things that you mentioned were those performance dashboards. Like all workforce boards, ours is primarily made up of private sector leaders, who are business owners, executives, business people who are accustomed to seeing data presented clearly, visually, and directly tied to outcomes. And what we had before, was functional, but just canned reports from our case management system, and they were built more for internal tracking rather than governance level decision making. And so, in partnership with our board members, we rebuilt something that actually resonated with them, and that took a lot of iteration. We're still working on it now. And one piece of that dashboard that we're really proud of, I think, is the customer satisfaction. You mentioned it earlier. We regularly survey our job seekers, employers, and our partners to hear about their experience with our system. And sometimes the feedback is hard to receive. But, we told our team we're putting ourselves out there and we're asking for more feedback and we're going to get it. But that's the point. If we're only looking at data that really just confirms what we already believe, we're not really committed to improvement. So the surveys help us be held honest and directly shape how we've adjusted our services and provider expectations over time. So with that combination, giving our board the right data and the right format for grounding that data in what our customers are actually experiencing, it's really what makes accountability rather
Mhm.
than just performative.
Right. And I will say, when we have our partner meetings, direct quotes from surveys are reviewed, and the good ones and the challenging ones.
Yes.
And we talk about how to solve problems with our partners so that we can fix what came up in a survey response. So
Great.
I'm happy to see that it doesn't just go into, go into cyberspace or something, that we actually bring the reason we ask is so that we can address, and we do that with our partners. Drew, the governance piece, speaking about our board, the governance piece is something we feel very strongly about. Our board is not just a compliance body, although that piece is important, but they're actively engaged in looking at performance, employer intelligence. We tell them they're our eyes and ears, and holding us accountable. How important is that kind of board engagement nationally?
I think it's very unusual to have a high performing workforce region that doesn't also have a high performing workforce board. You might have a high performing workforce board that doesn't have a high performing region, but it's very rare that you see it operate the other way. And so I think having a board that wants to be there, number one, I think is very important. Number two, I think having a board that understands what their role is. And so many boards throughout the country, someone gets appointed, they don't orient them, they don't really know what a workforce board is, and don't really understand the role and responsibility that they're there to fulfill. It's far too commonplace. And so, how do you change that? And then, how do you get them acclimated to the way in which you report, right? How do you get them to where they understand what the data really means? Because if they can understand those things, they can start making a greater impact, right? They can start making recommendations, or they can introduce a new employer, or they can, recommend a partner agency that would be a good referral source, for folks. But they have to have that understanding in order to really be effective at even just doing the governance and compliance pieces of their job. But a highly engaged board can be so much more. And I think that is certainly a learning and an observation that we at NAWB have for boards across the country. And I would say that it's maybe only 10% of boards that I would say are truly high performing, that really have that high level of engagement and that have set a culture and an expectation at their board level of being that type of board. And I think that's very important takeaway for folks that might be listening.
Thank you. One of the things we've implemented is we do a board member orientation, but we invite our new board members to attend job seeker orientation. And so they can actually see and hear what the new job seekers see and hear as they're coming in for our programs. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on that. They feel like it's well worth the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, those intensive experiences for board members. And you know what else I would invite them to do if you ever get the chance? Have them experience going out with one of your business services folks as well. Because what a great opportunity to have another business person observing and maybe even coach your business services team members to say, hey, think about maybe this, or to really understand how they interact, and maybe that ideas, maybe even your board member can bring more opportunities to you because we did something. So I think, but it's great that you're already doing that kind of an intensive board orientation. So kudos to you all.
Thank you. Anything else you would like to share, Drew, boards throughout the country that might want to move in these best practice directions?
Yeah, I mean, I think first it starts with, making sure that you have a board that functions well together. We have some really smart boards, but we don't often get the opportunity to have the boards really members interact with each other as well, right? And the highest performing boards that I see in the country, the board members are actually working with each other on ideas. They're meeting out the normal, cadence or rhythm of meetings for coffee and things like that. Like this observation, you asked me a question a minute ago about, governance. Well, I may not be willing to raise my hand in a room full of my peers with 24 other people and ask a question, but one-on-one with your board chair over a coffee, now I've gained that understanding that makes me more effective. So I really encourage boards to try and create a culture of connectedness as well, the same way that we want, our center staff to be connected to our partners. And like we have to be the convener of conveners, we got to convene amongst ourselves too, right? So that makes us the convener of conveners of conveners, maybe. I don't know, but I think that's one of those things that you just see when you have a really high performing board. They're just people who like to work together because they like each other and they understand each other and they understand the work. Those are such high qualities. And that's why you end up with 8 minutes worth of introductions on a stage, because you've got people that want to be together, that want to celebrate together. What a huge indication of a positive culture that your board has set there in Ventura County. And I thank you for that. That's really amazing.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you helping us bring it to um, a big picture perspective nationwide, because as I also said in those remarks, we also want to support the system. It's not about one workforce board. It is about strengthening our system across the country because so much important work is being done and it is of so value. Looking quickly at what's next, and then we're going to wrap up here. Norman, what are you most excited to dig into over the next couple of years?
I think some people might be scared of it, but I think AI is definitely one thing that we're trying to embrace and dig into in the next couple of years. We've already started embedding it into how our staff work, how we support job seekers, and how we engage businesses. And I think more we dig in, we see the potential that it brings. It's really not about replacing the human side of what we do, but really about freeing up our time and our team to do more of the work that only humans do. The relationship building, the case management, the coaching, the problem solving, all of that can be automated. And we're really genuinely excited of where that's headed.
Mhm. Great. Yeah, and certainly every conference we've attended, every meeting we're in, we're talking about how to go about that in a planful way, and in a constructive way, and utilizing the best of the technology moving forward, and helping our customers do the same thing. I'm very excited about we've just completed our 26 to 28 strategic plan and done the strategic planning with the partners and how I'm very excited that now in every board meeting, we're devoting time for dialogue on one of those goals so that it's not something that we're just reporting out metrics. We're excited that we have a tool for reporting metrics on each goal, but we're also having dialogue with the whole board about one of those so that we don't just talk about them once a year at strategic planning. And there's been a very warm receptive to that too, a very warm reception to that too. So I'm really looking forward to how this work unfolds on the ground. And very eager and excited to see what improvements we can make through the process of reauthorizing our funding, so that we can make some of the processes perhaps a little easier for our customers, especially our business customers. We're going to close with one final question for all of us. This award is called the WIOA Trailblazer Award. What trail do you hope this recognition helps us blaze or helps us move down? And Drew, let's start with you.
So, honestly, I hope that you can be an example for other boards, not just across California, not just across the West, but across the entire country. As we move towards reauthorization and things like that, we need more boards exhibiting the behavior board and your staff are exhibiting. I It's the kind of story that shows that boards are impactful at the local level in our communities. I'm stealing the idea of reading your survey results, positive and negative, in board meetings. I'm going to start sharing that with others, and in your quarterly partner meetings. I think those things are exceptionally important, and really solid best practices that others should be, adhering to. So again, congratulations and on this well-deserved honor.
Thank you. Norman?
For me, I think this recognition is really about showing what's possible when a team can innovate without getting stuck in all of the bureaucracy and red tape. So I think the trail that I hope we're blazing shows other boards and communities that you can run a public workforce system with the same creativity, rigor, accountability you would expect from any other high performing organization. And our customers really deserve that. Our communities deserve that. The people coming through our doors have real hopes and needs and deserve a system that operates at its best. And that's the standard that we hold ourselves to. And I hope that this recognition inspires others to also reach for that.
I don't think I want to say anything else after what you just said, Norman.
That's great.
You
Yeah.
captured it so well. But what I will say is thank you also to the Office of Economic Vitality, the County of Ventura, and the Board of Supervisors, because they really do empower our workforce board to do what we do. And the support that we do sit within the county, the support that we get is exactly what we need to be able to be productive and continue to serve the community. And so we thank them for that because I do believe it is their support, but also the room to grow the way we've grown has made all of this possible. To our listeners, thank you for tuning into Ventura County Works. Please subscribe and share this episode with someone who should hear it, and leave us a review wherever you listen. You can find this wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for being a part of this community. And thank you again so much, Drew, for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.